First off, Mr. Ian McClarty, President of phoenixNAP, and Mr. Rick Vanover, Director of Technical Product Marketing at Veeam. Ian, take it away.
Thank you for the introduction. My name is Ian McClarty. I'm President of phoenixNAP. What I'm going to be covering today is protecting the cloud, the multi-cloud. We're going to go over some security and compliance best practices. This is not a product pitch, but I do need to give some context around who we are, since we're a little bit lesser known. So who is phoenixNAP? Well, we've been around for about 10 years now in operations. We're really focused on infrastructure as a service as a company. That is really our core is infrastructure as a service. Even though we do an own and operate a nice facility in the Phoenix metro region, we have over 500 employees worldwide. We really run a true follow the sun model in all of our products. And then we also have 10 plus global data center locations. We're actually getting closer to about 15 global data center locations at this point. We do have headquarters physically in Phoenix, Arizona, as well as Amsterdam, Netherlands. And we've won a couple of Veeam awards. So we really embrace the disaster recovery and backup and recovery message, really follow the 3-2-1 rules that are out there from Veeam. And we've been inside the Veeam ecosystem for many years now. And a couple of years ago, we won a nice Rising Star Award, and then last year we won a Innovation Partner Award for some of the integration work that we did with the control panel and Veeam to make it more easily for resellers actually to deploy services to their end clients. And again, we are also a very channel-friendly company too. We won an award last year from CRN. So just a little bit of our footprint, just a little high level here. Plenty of network maps there showing connectivity. So we run a really nice tier 2 backbone at this point, heavily interconnected. We don't focus on just peering traffic off. We actually focus on what are the best carriers per region. So for example, in Singapore, we have NTT, we have Tata. NTT support the Japanese market, Tata to support the Indian market. We have Telstra for the Australian and just general market in some of the lesser regions. And we also have PCCW for China telecom routes that are China light. So we have a pretty good mix, but we don't focus on just going down to the bottom of the cost basis. We focus on really good peering connectivity and direct tier 1 providers, and that's really what our tier 1 backbone provides on that, and it's all interconnected as well. We also do DDoS mitigation at the edge, which is also different. So most infrastructure companies at our level, they are not offering DDoS mitigation for free. We do that up to 20 gigs per instance per system, and we have been developing edge mitigation now in some intellectual property since almost the beginning of the company. A couple of our solutions here from a high level. So we have co-location, dedicated servers, cloud services, security services, backup and disaster recovery. So one thing to note, we are not a managed services company. What we provide to clients is infrastructure services. We basically give you a bunch of Lego building blocks, give you easy ways to implement, and we manage the back-end infrastructure. So if I'm giving you, say, a cloud solution, it's really a VMware stack, all in OpEx model. We do all of the VMware management, patching. We do all the hardware replacement. We do all the scale out for it. And we do that in a simple contractual way for you, so that you are only basically just doing a couple different line items, and then we translate that out to scale out on our end. So that whole infinite scalability, we provide parts of that, but it always comes with a caveat. And even with like AWS and Azure, it isn't a true infinite scalability. You can do dedicated resources and pay a premium for that. So the better that you know your workloads and what that's actually going into your cloud, the better you can actually leverage your cost basis and negotiate that. We do a lot of dedicated systems, which is also different than most of the IaaS providers. That's actually a version of I wouldn't say anti-cloud, but it's another way to skin the cat. Really, it's going after more of a Kubernetes, container type environment in the future. We're putting a lot of API implementation into that and a lot of automation as well, orchestration. We continue making investments in that product line, since there is a subset of AWS clients, Azure clients that do migrate out of services once they do figure out, hey, there has to be another way to lower my cost basis for bandwidth, for scale out storage, for scale out compute. But I don't necessarily want to own and operate anymore. I like what AWS provided from that perspective, but I need to find a solution that is more cost controlled, and we offer that with dedicated systems that are going more API focused. And again, we do co-location all over the world as well. There are plenty of still legacy apps that exist in the market today that are not in the cloud. There is that progression to cloud, but it hasn't really happened for many companies. In that's one of the reasons why we're also talking about best business practices around security services, because it truly is a multi-cloud environment. Even with the product mix that we have today, there's very much of a legacy app to in the cloud, to direct connectivity back to AWS and Azure. It's really a very mishmash system. And then our security services are really we're not a MSSP either. We are focusing on adding more security and compliance systems and services around all of our product lines. So we do colocation, dedicated servers, and cloud services. And backup and disaster recovery are really a bolt-on to all these different product lines. I mean, they are the last lifeline for a breach, really. And that's how we see the backup and recovery market. So multi-cloud use and priorities. Again, I kind of touched on this a little bit, but today most organizations are running some, a mix and match of private, public, colocation. They're experimenting with next generation workloads. The one thing that we're also that a lot of people don't talk about is software as a service. So there are a lot of companies that have moved over to software as a service, platform as a service offerings as part of their ecosystem as well. And there are some difficulties with that. It's wonderful from like a end user perspective, easy to manage. You have all your data easily accessible. But what happens when your system goes offline? Which the cloud providers do go offline from time to time. They go under they are attacked. They have just human error, so that happens sometimes. Sometimes just some bad code. There are outages that constantly happen in software as a service models and platform as a service models. And it's great that you have your data, but you are not up and running. So there's still a kind of like Achilles heel in all this nirvana of cloud systems, right? Unless you have a like-to-like product in-house or a like-to-like product that you can launch somewhere else, you're really going to be offline for that service piece that you have. As an example, say Salesforce. Salesforce goes offline. You are basically you're stuck with trying to figure out how do I get my salespeople and how do I actually service clients, get quotes out, and when we find is that you have to put a manual process in place sometimes because the systems just are not there to support the uptime. So we talked a little bit about the really one thing this slide doesn't really encompass. It really talks about like the high level, but to simplify this down, there's more security compliance being distributed out to the especially the ecosystem in the U.S. and Europe. And one of the reasons for that are breaches, security and they do happen. They happen all the time. I mean, this year I was doing an event a couple months ago, and a couple months ago it was about 4,000 breaches that were reported to the market. And we're talking about real breaches here. Whether that be a credit card loss or that be compromise of patient data. These and that's only on the reported side. So there's a lot of subsets of that are not reported, obviously, and because of these breaches that do occur and will continue to occur. I mean, there's even a company that has patching levels and has has all the business practices from a security perspective. There's still zero-day exploits that you need to account for. You cannot get away from them, and these zero-day exploits are causing, and these breaches are causing there to be more and more ecosystem responsibility. Meaning, if I'm in the healthcare field and I'm a hospital, now I'm looking at my janitorial services for HIPAA. Now I'm looking at I may have some data center backup services. Now I'm holding my data center, even though they're not touching my data per se. They may be just providing a DR site for me. I'm still holding them accountable, and I still need to know that they're following HIPAA standards and HIPAA rules. And so that's one thing that we focus on very heavily as an organization, and we're getting that direct feedback from both from the MSSPs that we partner with, and also from the C-level that we speak with. Everybody's seeing this more accountability, and the C-level is also being held accountable. So we find that security companies are also having a lot more of the ear of the C-level because of these reasons. Again, just kind of talk a little bit of that. Just some Gartner stats: 400 billion loss of cyber threat worldwide in fraud. And again, this is just reported. It definitely is. It's a big problem. It's only going to continue to get worse. Cloud systems are getting more complex. More and more companies are embracing more complexity in their environments, not simplifying it down. Even when you go all in the cloud, it still brings its own challenges. This whole infinite scalability. Again, it creates sprawl. It creates a lot of easy ways to launch code, a lot of easy ways to launch systems. This ease of use comes with a trade-off, and it's typically a security compliance that checks and balance. The companies, when they mature and they start to implement, or they're being forced on by their vendor to a PCI-focused company, a fintech company, they're also over time expected to fill the level of certification. So I'm going to go over a couple of the just best business practices, and we can make these available to you as well. So if there's any questions on these, or you would like to get a drill down of this information, we can provide that. Understand that protecting the multi-cloud best practices. So first off, understand that this is a shared model in a lot of ways. There are definitely different ways to segment and to protect more data and to let's say you're in public cloud, you may have a noisy neighbor, but there are things you can do internally to protect your data. You may want to, obviously encryption is in the very minimum that you do, right? You want to also evaluate your cloud provider. So, not all cloud providers are created equal. You really want to take it from a business perspective and define what are your goals, what are you trying to accomplish here. Is this something that is being mandated by your senior management? Is this something you're trying to do to basically extend your budget out? You do need to outline your goals so you can have a clear expectation of where you want to head with this. You want to evaluate different solutions as well, and then you want to look at the SLAs that the different vendors offer. So, and not just like network SLA, uptime SLA, but also look at what they offer you from a when the SLA does occur, when there is an outage. What does that mean from a compensation perspective? A lot of people think that just because I have 100% network uptime, that's cool, but what does that really mean when it comes to the credits I will receive for that network uptime? And then how does that balance out with my business goals, right? Is this SLA even clear, even close to where I can go? Is it just to provide a little bit of accountability to the vendor? But a lot of times you'll find that these SLAs are not going to cover your business loss. I mean, they're going to be nowhere near your business loss. Again, I go beating down into the SLA side of the house, but there has to be some internal introspection that happens. A lot of times, it's setting expectations internally. You have to develop not just a good SLA with the vendor and negotiate that out, but also a good internal SLA. For example, if you're going to take a lot of your services to the cloud, what does that mean from an availability perspective when it does go down, and when you need to bring it back up? From a business perspective, do you have departments and do you have systems that are okay to be offline for a couple hours or an hour? Or do you need to have a true high availability and for more mission-critical departments? Say you have a large call center. For most organizations, that's a mission-critical department. Being able to service your customers at the end of the day, being able to give them, give them support, that can go down. So if that mission-critical environment goes down, what is your plan B? How can you get it back up and running? You also want to get access to the workload management tools that are available. So many vendors offer a tool sets also to provide transparency, telemetry back to you. That's very important. Leverage those tools. Also make those tools part of your ecosystem. So just because you're outsourcing pieces and components to an outside party, make sure that you bring them back in-house to the support mechanisms that you do have. We find that most companies have their own IT departments, especially today. Even when we're talking about like outsourcing components from a capital perspective, right, infrastructure services, there's always a component piece of being able to bring that telemetry back in-house, being able to buddy check the vendor, getting reports in a timely manner, doing QBRs. That's very important too. Knowing the health of your environment. Is my environment in a healthy state today? Is my environment being patched? Hold your vendors accountable. Ask for transparency. Ask for telemetry. Ask for API ways of doing these things too. I mean, really push your vendors across the board. A lot of the public cloud providers are providing some pieces of this, but they provide the true telemetry. A lot of times you have to add your own systems in place. Hold them accountable. Start asking for these things. It doesn't matter if they're extremely big or they're extremely small. Start setting different expectations to your vendors. And then assure access to security experts. So, there's definitely a global security talent gap that's happening, especially in the U.S. market today. There's a lot of companies, and I see this in RFPs and just as we're having conversations. I need my data to be touched by only U.S. citizens, right? Because that's a compliance thing that I have going on in my company. I have, I need the security experts to only be in the U.S. Because again they're seen as a protection mechanism. But the reality is that there is a major gap in jobs today for security personnel. One of the reasons why we didn't go the MSSP route and we decided to partner with MSSPs was for that reason. I mean, we saw staffing becoming a challenge more and not getting any easier. Even building a talent in-house, you build it and then you just basically set it up so that it can go somewhere else, which is not a bad thing, but it's something that it's never a winning battle. Today, the market is not providing enough. Even students coming out of security departments and security schools, degrees-wise and also certification-wise, to meet all of this shortfall that we have in the workforce. What we do find is that MSSPs are typically more tiered. They typically have they've seen a lot more of these challenges and a lot more of these things. You do pay a premium for that expertise, but make sure it's available to you and your partners. Internally too, we do have a lot of expertise as phoenixNAP on the security side that is available. It is available from an advisory perspective, and it's not something we charge for. But we're also not going to do the work. We're going to recommend you to a partner that can do the work. But at least just being able to tap into a resource, being able to get some help, that's important, and make sure that's part of your vetting process. So one thing that is very important, especially on the network side, is that connectivity back to whether it be a public cloud, private cloud, whether you're doing DR services back. There's always a connectivity piece that is very critical to this, and there's different ways to skin that cat. A lot of companies, they say, hey, I have some bandwidth, I have I have a firewall, so I need to VPN in over to somewhere else. Make sure that whatever you're doing and that's a good short-term gap solution. At least some layer of encryption, some layer of protection is better than nothing. But it does add some overhead, and also if you're doing, for example, backup and recovery services, it may actually not be enough bandwidth, or it might be too much overhead to be able to do encryption. Veeam does offer specifically some encryption, and some acceleration on its own on the software side, which is nice. So it does take care of some of those issues, but it doesn't resolve everything. And then you also have, from a multi-layer perspective, you can do a lot of different connectivity pieces. You can go, hey, I want to go direct connect back to AWS from my headquarters or from my data center. There are services that are offered, with your telecom providers. You pay a small premium for that, but you're getting a more dedicated link versus just going public cloud or over the internet. There are better ways to skin the cat. Same thing with Azure, same thing with Google Compute. In our data center, we have next generation vendors as well that like Packet Fabric and Megaport that offer these services. And to multi-cloud strategies, multi-cloud vendors, enough the people that do use it leverage it well, and it is always a security compliance stance that they're taking with that. So that's something to be very cognizant of. And if you cannot protect your data from a physical perspective, meaning connectivity, direct connects, cross connects that you can do, you can also protect it from another perspective, which would be encryption side. So make sure that all the vendors that you're using in your ecosystem and all the data that you are moving around is encrypted. And then backing up your data. So this is your last line of defense. And back it up in everything. Don't back it up just in, I have my ERP system backed up, I have my VMs backed up. Really sit down and do the pecking order of what is mission critical from a backup perspective, and then from a DR perspective. Two different things. First, back up all your data. That should be a given. And then really tier your data and say, look, what is mission critical? What needs to be up and running? And look for solutions that are out there. Like, for example, our disaster recovery services are really geared around having your data not just backed up, but also having the available compute storage, memory resources that you need to get your production environments back up and running. And then we also do something a little different. We do a free run book. So we figure out, okay, what is it that your environment is really going to require to be up and running? And then we go and exercise that at no cost to you twice a year. We make that available to you, saying, hey, go vet it out, test it out, making sure that when you do need it, it's available to you and it's real, and it isn't just something that you have to go and now in last minute go try to get it back up and running. And that alleviates a lot of problems. And with all that, I'm going to pass it over to Rick.
Well, cheers, Ian and David. Thank you for everything so far today. And Veeam, if you're not familiar with us, we really want to go right at the edge of what Ian just ended with. And that's, take a backup and a DR strategy pretty seriously. Ransomware is probably one of the best examples of why you need to have it right today. But daily disasters, accidental deletions, all these other challenges are just part of the problem. And IT pros know that there are a lot of challenges around this multi-cloud world. And I should highlight that cloud, as David was illustrating in the opening, means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And I always like to say that cloud is a model of elasticity, consumption-based pricing, things like that, rather than just flat out assuming that it's, Amazon Azure or something else. And then the whole market of service providers, I think, are very important. But we see a real set of challenges around data criticality, and that really comes down to your business. The best example is just what have you digitally transformed process-wise? You probably need it available. And the amount of growth and the amount of sprawl, new services, new apps, new amounts of data. All these challenges are real, and we have these other kind of pressures of being available. So we want to make it easy for you to keep everything available. And we actually are convinced that there is a very strong market opportunity for backup as a service and DR as a service. So I guess I should just define what those two mean. DR as a service is really a powerful technique for being able to get a DR target in place without having to build that second site. That's one way to look at DR as a service, leverage a service provider to do that. And the one secret weapon here about DR as a service is you don't have to refactor your applications. If you think about taking whatever you have and going to the hyperscale public clouds, it's going to change a few things, right? But DR as a service usually can go down the path of being the same platform. Backup as a service as well, and variants of that, right? Leveraging different services for your backups. There's a huge market for this. We actually feel that, just the top one there, store data remotely for DR, getting backups off-site, that's a fundamental challenge that a lot of organizations still struggle with. Additionally, more cost-effective than in-house. That's the best case for the notion of build a second site or leverage a service provider. Keep the staff available for more strategic initiatives. Heck yeah. You want to make sure that you're modernizing apps and transforming everything else, knowing that your DR and backup strategies are sound, right? So that's our view on the market. And hopefully you, as a practicing IT pro, kind of find that some of this makes sense to you. But as we look kind of further, there needs to be kind of a collection of services. The first I want to highlight is infrastructure protection, which universally infrastructure protection as well as off-site backup and disaster recovery and public cloud protection are a collection of what I would say critical capabilities that really build off of each other. So we'll start with infrastructure protection. So infrastructure protection really aligns to two different ways. You can go about it with managed service providers or service providers. And, in the Veeam world, we can do that through products that you might already know about. Veeam Backup and Replication, Veeam One, Veeam Agents. And this is very important because this is a broadening portfolio across different services. So the agents, if you're not familiar, those work for your physical servers, laptops, those Windows tablets if you want as well, Windows and Linux. So you can actually have this broad set of protection rather easily. And the other side of that is that managed service provider backup. And, when Ian was talking about how they view managed service providers as well, I think this is very important. And then same type of thing. The backup is done with Veeam technologies and the other values around offsite storage, or even just managing the fact that things are backed up. You can even go that full down approach if you would like as well. And this isn't just necessarily sending your backups to the cloud. You can actually fully commit to this offering as taking your data services, and I don't want to use the word outsourcing, but leveraging a service provider for the operational break fix, day-to-day stuff. If you don't want to spend your time doing that with backup and then know that you have great recovery with Veeam, there are technologies and service out there to do that today. And that's one of the versatile elements of Veeam software is that it can be used so many different ways. You might be using it on-prem already, but you can easily say yes to a service provider for other services just like that. And then The other third kind of guiding principle I wanted to share with you is around off-site data protection. And again, people still struggle with this. Everything from site failure to ransomware, and usually when you go off-site, it kind of implies you might have a different set of authentication. Ransomware is a great example, and the very first thing we list on the top site is Veeam Cloud Connect. If you're not familiar with that, that's basically backup storage in the sky, lack of a better word. And it's a completely different set of authentication, different storage, and especially if the insider protection element of it is used. There's even an out-of-band immutable copy of the backup data. So even if we had a malicious administrator, ransomware that was very Veeam aware, all of those different types of problems, that insider protection backup can be preserved. And we always have advocated this notion of the 3-2-1 rule, having 3 different copies of your data on 2 different media, one of which being off-site. That's a really strong technique that'll keep you resilient against a lot of different failure scenarios, and it doesn't require any specific technology. It paves the way for a great cloud story, a great service provider story, and then also the DRAS situation, that disaster recovery kind of business competency. Disaster recovery isn't a technical thing, by the way. I always kind of go into DRAS and disaster recovery in general. It's not moving data. That's easy. But knowing that your business can run very easily, that's the hard part. So that's why I say it's a business competency. But my earlier point about not having to refactor applications for DR, best way to verbalize that is if I have VMware on premises, I want to run VMware in DR. If I have VMware on premises, if I'm running Azure VMs, something's got to change in the middle. This is an element here where you can have a very transparent disaster recovery, paving the way for that business competency to be a little bit easier of a conversation. And when it comes to getting backup data off-site, I think it's also important to note that it's a broad set of your different sources of data, whether it's virtual machines, VMware and Hyper-V, workstations, physical servers, basically driving those backups to the cloud, or more specifically, a copy of those backups to the cloud. That's also an important way to look at this. I'm not necessarily saying get rid of all your on-premises backup storage, but maybe it makes more sense if we have a mechanism in place that will allow you to easily get backups off-site. And by the way, I think workstations is an emerging area for this. I've seen a lot of organizations that really worry about remote workers and the basic availability of what they have on their workstations. You can very easily, with technologies from Veeam and phoenixNAP today, deploy workstation backup for your remote workers and have those backups go to the cloud, to a service provider resource. And the magic here is that no VPN is required, and then some really awesome Veeam stuff happens in the middle. For example, if the end user is on an airplane without Wi-Fi, when it's time to do a backup, Veeam will actually queue up the restore point, so you won't miss the backup even if they're offline. And once they get connected to the internet, then it'll sync it up. So little smarts like that can really take care of what I call the little pockets of important data. And then disaster recovery as a service. This is another one that I think when you look at, again, your virtual workloads, having a target to fail over to without refactoring the applications, I think is a really powerful competency. And the beautiful thing about the way Veeam and our partners have implemented DRAS is it has a relatively transparent failback. You don't want to be too sticky with failover, okay? And the failback, just to give you a little piece of advice, it's only the differencing block since failover, okay? So assuming that the production site is recoverable, best example is large-scale power outage or network outage. You decide to fail over, and when it comes time to fail back, you're only going to take the differencing blocks. The important thing here is you want to have the confidence that business competency of disaster recovery works, is easy, because sometimes if it's not very easy to do, if is fiddlesome and error-prone, organizations will actually not fail over. They will sit there and stay down and unavailable. It's not really the expectation of 2019. So when you look at this menu, lack of a better word, of having off-site backup, service provider backups and data protection driven through managed service providers, as well as opportunities around the cloud and software as a service, getting this done, there's a really big responsibility, and Veeam realizes that there's a lot that honestly it just makes more sense to leverage service providers to do, and that's the way we've structured our business and our partnerships. Kind of breaking it into these three services here, I like to say that you could look at this as to the cloud, going offsite backup and DR, that first column. Within the cloud, meaning protecting the data you have in the infrastructure, and then the public cloud protection. So from, meaning if you needed to move your data out of the cloud, you can do that as well in the public cloud, Amazon, Azure, as well as our emerging Office 365 product, which is actually our fastest growing product right now. And if you're not backing up your Office 365 data, you should. Anyways, getting this done is arguably easier when you have a service provider because, again, IT organizations want their staff to focus on building a more robust production technology deployment for production apps. And by having a service provider in the mix, you can do that. So we have a lot of products to help you get there, but if you had to visualize it simply, Veeam is really focused on having simple, reliable, and flexible products to help you manage the challenges of your explosive data growth, the sprawl, the dawn of the cloud. And to get this done simply, reliably, and flexibly, the service provider aspect is one way to help you scale your ability as an IT group and really not miss out on the expectations of the business. So, Ian, thanks for that opportunity to share the Veeam side of it. I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Rick. Rick touched upon all these things, so I'm not going to rehash them. But what we do offer, Veeam Cloud solutions based on backup and replication, disaster recovery. We also do managed backup for O365, so we are embracing the multi-cloud ecosystem. O365 was really the easy one to go in and provide a good backup solution. That was not inside O365. It's a misnomer that O365 has built-in backup, especially when you need to go back several versions behind. And then we also are able to offer that into, say, an infrastructure environment, so that in licensing around that, so you can do your own exchange systems if you as a fallback. If you have to get up and running, you were having challenges just getting your 365 instance back up, we have mechanisms to also offer that. And then we have a system called Data Security Cloud that's really based on security compliance. Today it's PCI third-party audited and certified. And we're also listed as a PCI DSS vendor when you go to the Card Association website. We are also finalizing all the HIPAA controls in place right now, and that will also get third-party audited. We are internally also have gone through all of the training exercises around HIPAA and getting all of our staff up so that we can be HIPAA high trust as well. So it's for us, compliance is definitely a journey, and we'll continue to add more and more. And that's what Data Security Cloud is really about. It's really about an ecosystem that is virtualized. It's ready for you to go, but it has third-party auditing compliance based around your industry, and then also all the proper controls and monitoring that is needed by third party. So real quick, I know we're wrapping up on time. So we've developed a couple things that are available to you on the especially on the Veeam related services. Free trials. So kick the tires, try it out. We have a pretty quick implementation. 2-day SLA. Typically, we do much better than that. 24/7, 365 support, available anytime. And what that means is live chats, phone call, ticket system. You want to do WhatsApp, you want to do some Slack. We have that available as well. So a lot of mechanisms, easy ways to get a hold of people, and there's always somebody at least available to you to do no more than 20-minute response time, but you can always pick up the phone and get a live person, always. And then we have also created a lot of automation and orchestration for a lot of our product lines. and we incorporate that all into what we call PNCP, which is really a control panel for automation orchestration. We're building more and more tool sets to allow more API-driven activities through that, so even bypassing our control panel. But all the back-end orchestration is the same for that system. We're just exposing most of it. And something interesting about this, we did win a Veeam Innovation Award for the integration work that we did, and it was really focused around the reseller market. But from an organizational perspective, so say that, why would I care about reseller services? Well, there's another way to look at it. If you're in an organization in IT and you're supporting multiple lines of business, you're supporting multiple organizations in your IT company, you might be part of a holding company. This is a really easy way for you to segment and then also to do billable back-end services back to different departments. So we get that feedback like that as well. It's really good for environments that are complex and your IT department supporting a lot of different pieces, and you want to have a good way to show your CFO or show your CIO, hey, this is how much we're spending to support these different systems. This is the back billing that we need to do. So it offers a lot of hooks and automation around that. So just a high level value prop of why Veeam and phoenixNAP. A personalized approach. We're very competitive in the market. We do have a lot of building blocks, but within those building blocks, we do have a lot of flexibility as far as how we apply them. Or even if, say, you come to me today and you're like, I really don't. I'm going into a cloud journey. I need to use an organization like yourself to get to the stepping stones. We're okay with that, and we give you flexibility along the way to get there. So whether that be services flexibility, revenue flexibility, term flexibility. You get a lot of different component pieces with us that we're not so hard set as some of our competitors. And then again, this is more for the reseller market, right? But we are a very channel centric and channel friendly company, just like Veeam. That's why we get along so well. We do have a very simplified deal registration and resource management system as well for channel. Just a quick use case that we had, with electric mirror. We've and this is again, any of this information can be made available to you at a later time. Don't want to overburden you with a marketing fluff, but just showing some we do get a lot of kudos, and we do have a good reputation for solid customer service and making ourselves available to clients. And with all that, I would like to thank everybody on the call. And I'll turn it over to Dave. Thank you.
Great presentation, Ian and Rick. We do have some questions for you from the audience before you go. And while I ask you those, I'm going to bring up this poll question for the audience. This is a multi-select question, and it says, what additional information would you like about the phoenixNAP and Veeam solution? Just select one or multiple options there. We appreciate that. So let's see. First question here is for Ian. This person is asking if you have any experience or feedback about banking customers moving towards cloud solutions.
Oh yes, sir. Wow, fintech. So one of the reasons from a DNA perspective is we are very PCI DSS focused. That's the first thing we embrace as an organization. We do work a lot with credit unions and some smaller banks. I mean, we're not working with Bank of America. I'll lay that, but we are working with a lot of banking customers that are moving towards cloud. And it is definitely a stepping stone. I mean, we do see that a lot of co-location is the easy go-to. They're starting now to do more and more IaaS infrastructure services. Depending on the organization, we also see there is a lack of sometimes resources, especially if you're a smaller bank. So we do have a good partner ecosystem that we bring in place. Like I said, we're not an MSSP, managed service security service provider, but we do a lot of infrastructure services that lend themselves nicely to audit controls and also to show exposure around that. So that's what we find is really a lot of transparency and a lot of and also being from a DNA perspective, being able to have a conversation with an auditor, being comfortable with it. We ourselves get audited twice a year. We get third party audited all the time. We swap around our security vendors every 2 to 3 years to just keep it fresh, a fresh set of eyes, and we do that on purpose. So it's really what we see for the cloud journey is really more about the being able to provide controls, transparency, and being comfortable with the compliance side. The technology side kind of follows suit of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's good to hear that more and more banks are adopting and warming up to cloud solutions. Let's see here. Next question is for Rick. They're asking, if I use Veeam already on premises, how hard is it to start using a service provider for DRaaS?
Oh, actually, good question. It actually couldn't be easier. As long as you can handle a username and a password and next, go, it's that easy. So things like DRaaS are very easy to onboard. Couldn't be that much more difficult, actually.
Excellent. Excellent.
Yep.
Go ahead, Ian.
Oh no, I was going to add a little bit to that. So from a service provider perspective, we as phoenixNAP are also in the drop-down venue. So if you go inside your Veeam console, you'll see phoenixNAP listed. You literally type in the username and password that Rick is talking about. From a DR perspective, we also, if you have any kind of pipeline limitations, because that does happen, we also have seed servers that we ship out to you. That could be anywhere from 60 terabytes to a couple petabytes. So one of the importance of DR and backup is to seed the information and then do the incrementals based on that. We do find that depending on where you're at from a corporate perspective or where your data centers are at, you might have some limitations in bandwidth, and so there is only Achilles heel to that whole equation, and that's why we have a sneaker.net service that we do for free, as a matter of fact, to you, so that you can get the data onboarded.
Excellent. Well, yeah, that sounds very easy. Well, it looks like that's all the time we have in our Q&A session, but a really great presentation, Rick and Ian both. Thank you so much for being on today.
Thank you.
Cheers.